Welcome today to this international webinar on climate mitigation finance. We're going to be looking into the question of how to bridge the gap between financial institutions and small and medium-sized enterprises. Next slide, please. If anyone has their microphone on, please mute it. Thank you. Today's webinar objective is to show how global industry and trade regulations are creating new incentives for financial institutions and small and medium-sized enterprises to accelerate climate action while contributing to the emergence of a new global financial architecture. We'll be formally launching the Climate Mitigation Finance Guide, which provides a framework for financial institutions to accelerate climate mitigation financing and identify mitigation opportunities in 11 subsectors. Next slide, please. So the question that we would like to pose today is around what is climate finance? Climate mitigation finance in particular. Climate mitigation finance is an activity that significantly contributes to the stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere. So an attempt to avoid or reduce emissions. It can also be aimed at increasing removals of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, with the intent of aligning with the long-term temperature goal of the Paris Agreement, which the International Court of Justice recently found to be a 1.5 degree goal. Next slide, please. The way in which Green Initiative perceives this is that they're drivers of climate mitigation finance and opportunities. The emerging global architecture for climate mitigation, for climate action, is generating structural demand for climate mitigation finance. So as climate disclosure, compliance, supply chain due diligence, and climate risk management duties expand, companies are more and more expected to demonstrate climate performance to remain competitive. So it's not simply a nice to have, but it's actually core to the corporate survival of an enterprise. This is a significant opportunity for financial institutions because as SMEs face increasing requirements, demand is accelerating for resources that will support this transition towards a low emissions economy. Next slide, please. So there's quite a complicated regulatory landscape that's emerging, and we're going to be touching on a number of these subjects today in the conversations that we have with the panelists. On one hand, decarbonization is largely becoming a market access condition in some jurisdictions. For example, in the European Union and in the United Kingdom, there's going to be the imposition of carbon adjustments at the border, which means that staying competitive will require emissions reductions investment in the countries where goods are being produced. This creates some opportunity for power shoring. So locating emissions intense industry countries where there may be lower costs to decarbonize or more sustainable energy grids to begin with. Supply chains are being repriced around this. So there are now issues relating to ensuring that your carbon is priced into the products, and global supply chains are being reoriented on this basis. There's a new asset class emerging, which is essentially green bonds, climate-related loans, transition loans, and blended finance. And early moving financial institutions will be able to capture a structural market advantage if they move on. On the flip side, financial institutions may also be facing issues around stranded assets, where they've made significant investments in, for example, fossil fuel infrastructure that will no longer be needed or environmentally safe in the coming years. Clean infrastructure and transition assets are becoming high-quality, policy protected collateral for financial institutions. This makes them essential enablers of climate mitigation finance. Governments in many countries are designing regulations to crowd in private capital, and those institutions that act become strategic partners. Others will face regulatory, reputational, and portfolio risks simultaneously. Next slide, please. In terms of Green Initiative's assessment of where financial institutions stand, most remain quite early in the process. So what we've kind of defined as the commitment and alignment phase. This is fairly simple to make, but you need to translate these types of commitments into decarbonizing portfolios, funding climate finance products, and deploying finance on the ground to make systemic change. So there's now a key opportunity to help banks move from commitment to portfolio decarbonization. And this is where Green Initiative does quite a lot of work around building internal capacity, assessing portfolios, and providing products to help manage this type of data challenge and implementation challenge. Next slide, please. We're now at a stage where small and medium enterprises are a critical point to comply, adapt, and capture climate mitigation opportunities. Mitigation finance is available, but its deployment is still quite low. However, new standards are creating an enabling environment for climate mitigation finance. And this is what we'll now get into in a discussion. Next slide, please. So Green Initiative has developed a climate mitigation finance framework based on standards, which we can get into in deeper detail at a separate time. Next slide, please. Please to the slide with the speakers. Thank you. So I'd like to now move on to our panel discussion. We have a number of esteemed panelists present with us today. I'd first like to begin by inviting Professor Jorge Apache to briefly discuss the subject of power sharing for approximately 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for having me and participating in this very important conversation. I'd like to highlight 2 or 3 points regarding power sharing. When you look at the landscape, the global landscape, what you see is an increasing demand for solutions for helping the globe to decarbonize faster and in a cheaper manner. This, of course, has to do with some important aspects, and of course, one of them is energy. Energy, as we know, is by far the most important area for us to decarbonize if we want to meet the Paris Agreement. We're talking about at least 50 to 60% of the entire expected budgets allocated for decarbonization over the coming years and decades. So there's a lot to do there. However, there are many things happening in this area, and perhaps one of them is related to the physics of energy. Why physics? For about 150 years, we got used to move energy from point A to point B. In other words, from where that energy was being produced, fossil fuels, of course, up to where that energy was consumed. being in the industry, households, and mining and some other areas, but mostly to manufacturing sector, chemical plants and others. But the physics of green energy is totally different. You cannot ship electrons and molecules. So this is already changing, and will change even more that conversation over the coming years and perhaps decades as well. So more and more we'll have to bring consumption up to where the energy is being produced, where we see, and that's where we see a huge opportunity for regions like Latin America, in some specific countries, including Peru, Colombia, Uruguay, Chile, Paraguay, Brazil, and some others, countries that have a very attractive set of conditions for exploring investments that need to decarbonize because they are energy intensive, such as the production of green hydrogen, ammonia, green steel, green aluminum, green chemicals, and many others. And that's where I see a very unique opportunity, not only for Latin America, but for SMEs in regions like Latin America. So what is needed in this regard? We have to speed up that agenda so that we could unlock a huge amount of capital in favor of regions that are rich in green energy. By developing these value chains in countries like, let's say, Peru or Chile, that could have very important direct and indirect impacts, not only from the business point of view, but also from the political, economic, and social points of view. And of course, SMEs are very much part of that agenda. And one final comment. If you look at the case of Colombia or Brazil or perhaps Paraguay, not Paraguay, Peru, what you see is that the regions or sub-regions that are more attractive in terms of potential in developing green energy are also the poorest regions of those countries. In the case of Brazil, the northeast part of the country, in the case of Colombia, La Guajira, and so on and so forth. So there is a very interesting combination of climate and environmental things, social, business, and economic development. And of course, SMEs, as I mentioned before, are very much part of that very critical agenda. I stop there.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think you raise a really interesting point on the physics side of things, where we actually spend a lot of our fossil fuels just moving fossil fuels around. That quite a significant amount of oil is used to just ship oil to different places around the world, and that just not doing that would actually help us to
Frederick, you have been muted.
Thank you. So I'd like to now move on to the next speaker. I would like to introduce Michael Spooner to please speak for roughly 5 minutes, and we'll hopefully turn back to have a second round as we move along.
Mark, this is the order you want to do it in now? That's okay with me. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, super. Can I share some slides, please?
Of course.
Great.
You should have permissions.
Good morning, everyone. And thanks for Thanks for being with us this morning. Today I would like to talk about something. First of all, can you see my screen? I presume you can.
Yes.
Great. One of the things that thanks for the opportunity to speak here. One of the things that has most changed my thinking after years of working in the Amazon is realizing that environmental destruction is often not driven by irrational behavior. It's driven by rational behavior made inside systems with the wrong incentives. As one of the largest private agricultural investments operating in the Peruvian Amazon, we spend a great deal of time reviewing ideas and business plans and financing proposals and strategies for climate mitigation and regional transformation. Many of them contain important truths. Many could contribute meaningfully as part of an integrated approach. But over time, one question has become increasingly important to us when evaluating any proposal. Will it actually change behavior? Because climate mitigation in land use sectors is not constrained primarily by identifying opportunities. It's constrained by converting finance into durable changes in behavior. Why is this important? Well, frontier regions like the one in which we operate are under pressure, and the current trends in many of them are not favorable precisely because they sit at the active boundary between development and the natural world. This is where populations grow. This is where economic opportunity is sought. This is where decisions that affect climate disproportionately are made every day. And those decisions follow incentives. In our experience, most land use decisions are actually quite rational, whether we like them or not. Our experience has led us to the simple observation that lasting environmental outcomes occur when the behaviors we hope to see become the rational choices for the people making them. That means creating conditions where restoring degraded land becomes more attractive than clearing forests, where permanent agriculture becomes more attractive than extractive cycles, where compliance becomes easier than informality, where improving productivity becomes more attractive than expanding footprints. When we create those conditions, then the transition becomes durable. Not because people are continually subsidized or persuaded, but because the economic and institutional systems begin reinforcing the outcomes we wanted in the first place. So how do we get there? I need to change slides just a minute. In our experience, we need to start with a field of study called the forest transition theory, originally developed by Alexander Mather and expanded by many researchers over the following decades. This work observed a recurring four-stage pattern across countries. Forest cover often declines during early stages of development, but later stabilizes and eventually begins to recover. According to this, an excellent analysis by Our World in Data that you see here, approximately 87 countries are now considered to have reached stage 4 of the forest transition, where their forests are stable or expanding rather than contracting. We find most of them in the Northern Hemisphere. Across almost all of these countries, forest recovery appears to have followed, not led, broader transitions in economics and governance. As economies become more productive, as land uses become more formal, as institutions become more capable, and as productive systems become more permanent, the pattern has been that pressure to continue expanding into remaining forests declines. That doesn't mean that economic growth automatically protects forests, but historically, durable forest recovery has often followed broader economic and governance transitions.
Mike, if you could share it full screen, if that's possible.
Well, it should be possible, but
on the bottom right, you should be able to present and then share something else.
Yeah, I tried to do that, and there you go. Does that work?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So we work in Peru. In Peru, nearly half of national greenhouse gas emissions are associated with land use change in forestry. The data are similar for other frontier countries and regions. At the same time, forest loss appears predominantly through many small conversion events rather than a small number of large clearings. We find that this is primarily because the incentives are structured or applied so that small acts of deforestation are rationally good choices for the people who make them. The incentive structures often unintentionally reward expansion over permanence, and the cumulative effect of millions of individual, rational but destructive land use decisions is enormous. So if forest transition follows economic and governance transitions, some of the most important investments in forest protection actually must take place outside of forests, on already degraded land, making those areas more productive and attractive than further encroachment into nature. That may be one of the most effective ways to stop expansion. Climate mitigation in these situations becomes a behavioral transition. So our goal is to create conditions where restoring becomes more attractive than clearing, and where the most rational choices for people become the most sustainable choices for landscapes. And I'll stop there because we're splitting things up, and I'll pick it up later on.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was a really thoughtful presentation. I've also thought about this forest transition issue and the station approach of some tropical tundra transitions that we've seen in countries like Japan, where actually Japan is very green, but that's because they import all of their timber from Indonesia and other tropical countries. So they've just exported the deforestation while making Japan look 80% forested. So there's also these complex. Raised very well.
Clearly.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Clearly, we're not trying to motivate that. That's correct.
On some of those points. So very much appreciate where you're coming from on that. Mark, could you please bring up the presentation again?
Of course.
I'd like to now move on to introduce our speaker, Mr. Ivo Mulder from UNEP Finance Initiative. I'd like to please welcome you to the floor, and please let me know if you have any questions.
I'm there.
Thank you.
I'm there, Fred.
Fantastic.
Great. All right. I'll also split it in two parts. Fully agree with Michael's point that money is a means to change behavior, and it's very easy for us as UN entities to say that more money needs to be directed to conservation or restoration. But the second part of my presentation, I'll focus on a number of examples, because I don't think we should be sitting on the fence and basically say where money is needs to go to, but actively help making that happen, and through that change behavior. Because I do agree, it's ultimately about changing behavior, not because I from Geneva is saying that something makes economic sense, but because a farmer in Peru or Brazil knows that it makes economic and financial sense, provided they've been given the incentives to do so. But just to set the stage, and I'm just keeping it to five minutes, Fred and Mark. I think what is important is to see the natural environment as the base of a wedding cake, which Johan Rukström from the Stockholm Resilience Institute is often profiling it. I mean, 50% of the natural environment is 50% of global GDP is dependent or highly dependent on the natural environment. And of course, if the base of the wedding cake is falling apart, then that ultimately has grave repercussions for the real economy and the financial economy. At the same time, we're basically throwing pocket money at nature-based solutions to the tune of 200 billion a year. And the so-called investment gap that we've quantified in the State of Finance for Nature is in the range of 350 billion. It sounds like a lot, but it's basically what we're spending on candy and ice cream on an annual basis. And at the same time, we're robbing the bank to the tune of 1 to 30 on a day-to-day basis. So we're basically putting $1 in our account, and we're drawing down $30 on a day-to-day basis. That's sort of the picture, and obviously it will be impossible to meet both the climate, the land degradation, or the conservation goals if you don't change the money flows for our economy. And this is where, rather than just writing these kinds of reports, we've really focused on setting up and developing a number of blended funds to demonstrate proof of concept, because we feel that actively supporting small and medium-sized enterprises in emerging markets, or actively partly reducing the risk for lenders and investors, is what is the best way to help kickstart that change. And that's what my team has done. Through these initiatives that you see on the screen, we've helped to leverage about $2 billion in capital for sustainable agriculture, restoration, and conservation in emerging markets. And we supported about 400 micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises over the past 4 or 5 years. I have 3 examples. I'll use one, and the other 2 I'll use in the second part. The main thesis, colleagues, and feel free to put me on the spot if you disagree, is that there's not going to be a silver bullet. We need to, if it comes to the connection between finance institutions and SMEs, is to recognize that not all SMEs are in the same stage of development. Some are in the ideation stage, some have raised some money, and others have sort of their own balance sheet and track records, and they need different types of capital along this continuum. We see this as sort of a value chain approach where different types of solutions are needed for different types of development. We have developed solutions in some of these cases that are highlighted in red. In other cases, we are still trying to fundraise for it. I'm going to give one example called the Restoration Factory, which is an incubation program where we provide technical assistance plus encouragement grants to SMEs. In a typical case, we would be supporting 50 SMEs in a given context. We link them to mentors who are providing in-kind support both online and in person through local enterprise support organizations. And the most promising SMEs who are in the incubation stage would also be provided with grants, because after, say, a 6 months to 12 months incubation phase, lots have good ideas and have it really advanced in terms of their business plans, their offtake agreements, the buyers, etc. But they do need small grants to basically take it to the next stage. This example is from Brazil, where we've supported more than 50 SMEs in the Amazon region of Brazil. We've done the same in Curitiba and Sao Paulo, as well as in other countries. And so the process is to make it practical through both online programs, in person on the ground, and have TA combined with grants to take them, to take the process further. Fred, I'll leave it here. I have a few more examples that others can that I can use in the remaining time. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Ivo. I think that really brings us back to the point that this is about many small actors, and that those small actors need support to be able to make the kind of contribution that we need on a global scale. I'd now like to move to our next panelist, who is Stefania Majeste. She is with UNCTAD, and she will be presenting on the topic of climate mitigation finance, SMEs, and sustainable value chains.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me fine?
Yes, we can hear you, Stefania.
I'm just trying to, yes, I found the presentation here. Can you see my presentation? Yes, okay. I see a lot of thumbs up. Thank you very much. Okay, great, thank you.
Perfect.
So first of all, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and thank you for to the Green Initiative for the invitation, and also congratulations, of course, for the launch of the guide, the framework guide. That I had the chance to take a look, and it's very complete, and at the same time very practical. So congratulations. So I work at UNCTAD, at the United Nations Trade and Development, and what I will try to do today is to bring a complementary perspective from UNCTAD on how international investment and business linkages, of course, can help SMEs to access finance, technology, knowledge, market opportunities, etc., all linked to their mitigation journey. And I think it ties very well to what Fred presented a little bit earlier, that now with the upcoming regulations related to carbon, and I think he mentioned supply chains repriced around carbon. I think this is very much the hook that I'm going to use for this first part of my presentation. First, I will present a little bit of the issues, the problems, and the opportunities. And then, if you're interested, we can discuss about policy recommendations or suggestions that we have to implement those and to take advantage of those opportunities. So yeah, I will pass this really quickly, but the guiding question is really how international investment can help SMEs to translate mitigation needs into competitiveness and financing opportunities. Very briefly, I will try to introduce to you what we are we talking about when we say international investment. Right? So foreign direct investment, or FDI, is an investment by a firm, by a company, sorry, in another country. And usually it involves a lasting business relationship between this company and the new country, the host country. So as you know, UNCTAD is all about development. And from a development perspective, the relevance of FDI flows, it goes beyond money, right? It's also jobs, it's also new markets, new technologies, business, etc. So we believe that for SMEs, there are two interesting pathways connecting this issue. I will focus on the first one, and then later we could discuss the second one as well. But for the first is that foreign direct investment, foreign investors, foreign MNEs, foreign multinational companies, they build relationships with local SMEs as suppliers or business partners. So those connections, what we call linkages, they can be translated into access to markets, financing opportunities, technology, know-how, but they can also create, and this is what we think the most interesting part is, they can also create a stronger business case for mitigation investment. This in the sense that SMEs may need cleaner technologies or better energy performance to meet the new expectations and remain competitive in those value chains. So, of course, the benefits are not automatic. SMEs will need finance and the capacity to upgrade. So we will discuss this a little bit later in the presentation. Just to illustrate this relationship and how we see that value chains, international investment and value chains can support SMEs in those journeys, in this decarbonization journey, is that we're seeing today that MNEs and multinational companies and large firms and investors, they are being asked by investors, by regulators, by their own clients, and by their own climate strategies, right? To manage environmental impacts across their value chain. So as an example, as you might know, a multinational company with a scope 3 science-based target. I don't know if you're familiar with the science-based target initiatives, but companies set and commit to targets. And usually when they set a scope 3 targets, they need to mitigate emissions related to their value chain. And they do this through engagement with suppliers on renewable energies uptake or mitigation actions, as well as, of course, reporting their emissions because they need this information as well. And then for the SME supplier, this can create, of course, new expectations, but also new investment needs, right? So an SME, in order to fulfill those requisites, an SME will need to be more efficient, to have to employ more renewable electricity, to have better data systems to measure their emissions, to report those emissions. So this is where the risk arises, right? If those requirements are transmitted to SMEs without the corresponding support, they can become an additional barrier, right? And since we're talking about SMEs, they already face a lot of constraints and challenges in terms of accessing finance and technical expertise. And really quickly, I will go to an illustration that I think ties well to Fred's slide in the beginning of the presentation, is that the EU-Mercosur agreement, right? Like, I'm not saying that the agreement creates entirely new environmental obligations. It's not what I'm saying, but this agreement reflects a broader trend. We see that trade opportunities are increasingly connected to sustainability performance, to traceability, to regulatory readiness. So if an SME wants to enter new markets or to stay in those markets, those mitigation investments and actions can work as de-risking. So very briefly, their connection with SMEs, the relationship with the M&Es, with the lead firm, can help the SMEs to get technical assistance, to get more information about cleaner technologies. They can engage in supplier development products. They can be supported in reporting emissions. And what I think is the most interesting is this provides them with more predictable or longer-term purchasing relationships. So a financial institution will see this, and we'll see that this relationship between M&E, between multinational and SME, will matter because there is a defined buyer relationship. There is a clearer business reason for the investment. There are potentially more reliable cash flows. There are better information on the upgrading process. So this is what I wanted to bring for now. Sorry that I passed a little bit of time. But for us, it's interesting, this perspective that the same value chains that transmit climate expectations to SMEs should also transmit finance, technology, and capacity building. So I stop for now, and we can discuss a little bit further.
Thank you very much, Stefania. I definitely appreciate this idea that with kind of expectations should come assistance and not. We saw this a bit in the fair trade side of things a number of years ago when many large American brands said they wouldn't buy anything except fair trade coffee, but they didn't provide any type of assistance to farmers to get fair trade certification. They just locked them out of the market. So there's certainly, we should be looking at this as a two-way street rather than simply one, which is profit-seeking enterprise. I'd now like to move on to Mr. Daniel Galvan, who works for UN Climate Change in Bonn. I believe he's in Panama. And he'll be discussing SMEs, climate finance, and Article 6 mechanism under the Paris Agreement. Daniel, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon. I would like also to congratulate Green Initiative for the publication of the Climate Finance Guide, also for organizing this event and inviting me. I feel honored to be here with the other panelists. I would like to complement the previous intervention, as it was mentioned by you, Fred. I would like to encourage or to link the climate action, the climate mitigation action from the private sector, especially from the small, medium enterprises, with the Paris Agreement goals. When we talk about the Paris Agreement, we think that it's only about commitments from countries, from related to mitigation and adaptation targets. that are usually described in the NDCs, but also within the Paris Agreement, the parties decided to establish what is called the Article 6 carbon market mechanisms and also the non-market mechanisms. And I think it's important to mention that it's the only article within the entire Paris Agreement that involves the participation of the private sector. Before the Paris Agreement, the parties agree on what was known as the Kyoto Protocol. There was another mechanism with different purposes, but with similar, let's say, activity cycle. And within this other mechanism, there were several projects that were implemented in more than 100 countries, and most of these projects were implemented by the private sector. So now with Paris Agreement, with Article 6, there is a new window for private sector to participate in carbon markets, to implement mitigation actions in different sectoral scopes. So currently, from UN Climate Change, we are starting operating this new mechanism. We are supporting the countries to establish, for example, policies, regulation. We are providing them with capacity building to establish institutional arrangement so they can be prepared to start, in this case, approving this type of different type of mitigation actions. That at least within this creating mechanism, there are 17 sectoral scopes that goes from renewable energy to carbon capture and storage. There are all type of sectoral scope. We are developing methodologies, and this guide developed by Green Initiative comes in very good moment, because what we have seen is that yes, the carbon credits creates an additional revenues, but the bottleneck for at least for the small medium enterprises is to access to climate finance. So in the past, most of the projects were implemented by the very large corporations, like companies with that they were not considered SMEs. So that's why we believe that this guide will help this time in this new window for to give more participation to SMEs. So I think for now I'm going to stop here. I understand that there will be a second round of intervention. So thank you so much, and I'm happy to be here. Back to you, Fred.
Thank you very much, Danielle. And thank you for explaining to us how this new mechanism under the Paris Agreement will start making some finance available. Our next speaker will be Mark Williams. He's the Executive Director of the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, and he will be presenting on climate mitigation, finance, and fisheries, a call to action.
Yes, good morning, one and all. Given the changes in splitting the presentation from 10 to 5, I will begin with the challenges and opportunities first in the fisheries sector, and then I will go to the solutions in the second half of the presentation.
Thank you very much.
We are gathered at a pivotal moment for our oceans, our economies, and our shared future. Across the region, such as the Caribbean and beyond, fisheries and aquaculture are not merely economic sectors, they are lifelines. They nourish millions, sustain coastal livelihoods, and preserve cultural traditions that have endured for generations. For many small islands and developing coastal states, they are the backbone of food security, employment, and national identity. Yet today, these same systems are on the front lines of a rapidly changing climate. Rising sea temperatures, ocean acidification, coral bleaching, shifting fish stocks, and increasingly frequent and intense storms are no longer distant projections. they are realities, reshaping our ecosystems and economies alike. Fishing grounds that communities have relied on for decades are becoming less predictable. Infrastructure is being damaged and livelihoods are under threat. While much of the global conversation has rightly focused on adaptation and helping communities cope with these changes, we must now sharpen our focus on equally urgent priority: climate mitigation finance for the fisheries sector. Fisheries are not only victims of climate change, but also part of the solution. Yet, unlocking the solution requires us to confront a difficult and persistent truth. Climate finance is not reaching the fisheries at the scale, speed, or structure required. Despite the growing global commitment to climate action, fisheries remain largely overlooked within the mitigation finance frameworks. This is not a reflection of their potential, but of a systemic barrier that we must address with urgency and clarity. Let us consider the challenges. First, fisheries are underrepresented in the global finance architecture. Mitigation finance has historically prioritized sectors such as energy, transportation, forestry, which have clearly defined emission profiles and well-established investment models. In contrast, fisheries, particularly small-scale fisheries and artisanal fisheries, are often perceived as too dispersed, informal, or complex to finance effectively. This perception has led to chronic underinvestment. Second, fragmented governance framework and weak data collection systems continue to constrain progress. In many countries, fisheries management is split among multiple ministries and agencies, often with insufficient coordination. Critically, fisheries are not always well integrated in national climate strategies, including national determined contributions. At the same time, significant data gaps persist. Without reliable data on emissions, stock health, value chains, and ecosystem services, it is difficult to design credible, bankable mitigation projects or to meet the stringent reporting requirements of international climate funds. Third, there is a capacity gap. Many fisheries institutions and stakeholders lack technical expertise to develop and structure climate mitigation projects. Ideas such as transitioning to low-emission fishing fleets or scaling sustainable aquaculture systems are promising. Still, without the ability to translate them into financially viable proposals, they struggle to attract investment. Fourth, accessing finance remains a major barrier. Small-scale fishers, cooperatives, and community enterprises often lack collateral, formal financial records, or legal recognition. As a result, they are excluded from public and private financing. This exclusion is not only economic issue, but a matter of equity and climate justice. Finally, this issue of perceived risk. Investors often view fisheries as volatile due to climate impacts, regulatory uncertainty, and fluctuating in markets. Without effective de-risking mechanism, capital tends to flow elsewhere. Thank you for now.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. It is quite a pressing issue in the region. I'm very glad to note that Green Initiative has been engaging on this and plans to continue engaging on this in the region. I'd now like to move on to our next speaker, Professor Emilio Lebre Rovere from the Central Clima. He's going to provide us with some insights, theory and insights on climate mitigation finance, particularly reorienting capital towards low carbon investment in the global south.
Thank you, Frederick. Emilio will. Oh, there you are. Thank you. Thank you, Emilio, for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. And I'm supposed to provide a kind of more theoretical insight on climate mitigation finance along the lines of my small piece of introduction to the SME financial guide. And so I was prepared to provide some kind of introduction to the debate, but suddenly yesterday night there was this turning upside down of the agenda. So I'm now in the situation of having the chance of listening to the previous speakers. So the good news is this will make my task much easier. But on the other hand, maybe I'm not going to add anything new to what your insights already provide very nice reflections on the subject. But mainly, what I would like to do is to call the attention that there is a general problem. Sorry? Well, that there is a general problem. Sorry? Is the mic open? Okay. And there is a general problem about climate mitigation finance, which is most of the missions and now the mitigation opportunities are located in the global south, while more than half of global savings is in the hands of 16 million millionaires, most located in the north. So the challenge is to the reorientation of a share of this chain savings towards low carbon and resilient projects in the south that would comply with the common but differentiated responsibilities principle. So the problem is not a matter of lack of money, but the structural barriers to channel the saving those to a lot of climate-friendly opportunities and viable projects. And the main barriers is, of course, the high upfront risks of these projects in countries of the global south, with half of the southern countries are below a BB investment grade, and they pay interest rates above 20%. And of course, they face a number of difficulties to access capital. The capital costs are too high. So in synthesis, what we need is to reform this financial system, which will take time, as already acknowledged in many international fora. But in the meantime, due to the climate emergency, we don't have to wait. And we all know, as we see the difficulties of the Baku to Belém roadmap to get to $1.3 trillion of capital flows, that we need innovative financial devices to try to speed up this capital flow. And I think it's important to notice that there are a number of good practices, good examples in providing different blended finance schemes that go beyond the simple solution. That's, of course, it's part of the solution, a substantial increase in the budgets of the multilateral development banks. But it's not only the amount of the budget, but the way it's going to be expanded. So in particularly to access this money and to try to use the money, for instance, available for guarantees is a problem for developing countries because it increases their exposure, and they are, of course, very keen to have a good investment grade. So you can't have collaterals from the developing countries. It's important that we can use public guarantees and sovereign guaranteed mechanism in a multi-sovereign way. That means that we need the guarantees to be backed as well by Annex 1 countries and get triple A backing from developed countries is essential to have these fair partnerships in order to foster the mobilization of private capital. This is just one of example of some new innovative financial devices that we need in order to get the money finally flow to small and medium companies, because of course they are very, very on the top of the list of the risks in this case. So I think that we could look carefully to some examples. We can see, for instance, the Eco-Invest mechanism now in Brazil is doing a very good job in mobilizing the commercial banks together with development banks and making available money at with some hedging on, say, on exchange rate risks, for instance, available at lower capital costs, and it's being able to invest in just 1 year and a half, nearly 1.5% of Brazilian GDP. So this shows that's actually possible through concrete, innovative schemes to mobilize the money that is badly needed to fund low carbon resilient projects in a small and medium enterprise. And development banks have to play a key role in bridging this financial gap. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. I think you undersell yourself in suggesting that you don't have anything meaningful to say after all these speakers. I think you raised some really important questions, and certainly some that I just faced while I was working in Africa for the Economic Commission for Africa, where most African countries don't even have a credit rating. So if you want to lend to SMEs, you're going to be charging them 15-20% interest. And I don't know any country where an SME could succeed on that kind of interest rate. As a startup, I mean, forget about it. Thankfully, we now have Marcos coming up next, who is also based in Africa. And maybe he can give us some insights from his perspective on this matter. Marcos is with the International Finance Corporation and he works on some of these matters.
Thank you. Thank you for your. I think it's a great segue to Professor Emilio's intervention and the other panelists. So I work for the International Finance Corporation. We are the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. So we are a development finance institution. I'm based in Mozambique, in Maputo. I have been working here in the Africa region and Latin America over the past 20 plus years. And I think Professor Emilio raised a very important point. What we see here, I want to bring two dimensions, the public sector dimension and the private sector dimension, and build on a little bit of what the other panelists have brought up. On the public sector side, continuing on the line of reasoning of Professor Emilio, we have a situation of growing indebtedness. The debt burden, and especially now with the oil crisis in the Middle East, it's just getting worse, right? Fuel costs of imports are skyrocketing in an already very fragile environment. So the use of certain instruments, such as debt for climate swaps, are probably very important and relevant tools that should be put into consideration to create what another speaker said. I think it was Michael that said about the incentive mechanism, right? You have to create the incentives for this structural change to happen, but they cannot happen on its own. These are also countries that have very low emission profiles. I would like to encourage the audience to look for a series of reports by the World Bank Group called the Country Climate and Development Reports. We have worked in more than 24 countries where you bring both the public and the private sector perspective on the intersection of development and climate, right? So yes, on the one hand, for the public sector, especially in the global south, it's a very, very big challenge, right? It's an unfair position that they're put in, as most of them have very low emissions profile, and at the same time, a heavy debt burden, but they are facing market entry barriers that are increasingly very high, right? So again, instruments such as, green bonds or debt for climate swaps, I think are particularly relevant at this point in time. I think the other one now, shifting a little bit on the private sector side, what do we see? We have many different green financing lines, right? We invest both directly and indirectly, meaning we invest indirectly in funds or in issuance of green bonds, but we also are a direct investor in projects, right? But there's a huge problem of information, or rather knowledge asymmetry, right? On both sides, on the public sector and the private sector south, specifically in the global south, right? So you cannot only create the instruments, you have to teach the market how to use them, right? Because these things are not going to materialize on their own. So to the point of my former colleagues, of my other colleagues mentioned, the need for hands-on capacity building is fundamental, right? It's not going to materialize on its own, and the roles of knowledge-sharing instruments such as the Climate Finance Guide, I think, are extremely important in this context, right? But beyond putting the information out there, you have to do the hard work. You have to sit down, meet the companies on the ground. You have to explain to them how this business is done. And with that, also demonstrate that the incentives are there and can be materialized, but there is a learning curve to get there. So in that sense, I think this discussion is extremely valuable for us collectively, working in this space to think, okay, where can we have the biggest impact, right? Be it through the technical assistance work that many of you are doing, including the Green Initiative, the off-takers, the large corporates, the public sector, or in international organizations. I think we all need to find our sweet spot in this equation and really work together with very concrete and specific actions, because otherwise, the trend is not our friend, unfortunately. And as we see in some countries, there is a big push to unfortunately backtrack on some of the progress that many of us have hoped for or are still working for today. So let me just stop here and thank the organizers for this opportunity, and also make myself available for any follow-up questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcos. There are many, many very important opportunities that are out there that we need to seize. We'll now be turning back to Professor Jorge Arbache so that he may discuss some of the opportunities that power shoring might be bringing for Latin America and reallocating industrial investments. Thank you, Jorge.
So thank you very much. Very insightful conversation. I'd like to highlight one specific point, which is demand. We take for granted this topic as go on today. We take for granted that the demand side is there, and we tend to put a lot of focus on the supply side. And there we talk about financing, we talk about capacity building, we talk about many things. So of course, they are extremely important, but demand side is important as well. And if you split the conversation on two different aspects, you will see that they may require different policies. And don't have the issue of decarbonizing the domestic economy. For that to happen, we may need a lot in terms of incentives, policies, financing, and some other financial instruments based or written on government or some other parts of guarantees and things like that.
Okay.
But yeah.
Is it possible you could disconnect your headphones so we can get a different mic input?
Yeah.
It's a bit blurred. Thank you.
Listen, I was making the point that we shifted to not because develop their green markets, their green businesses. Obviously, very important. In most of the cases, it is related to protectionism. It's related to certifications, to standards, to taxonomies that prevent development. The minerals.
Hi, Jorge. We're really not getting very good reception on this end.
Because they simply get not access to developed markets outside agreements. So what is needed? We need to develop green, stable markets. This is critical. Without that, look at the case of Ciban. Of course, I'm not defending
Jorge?
Not talking about just being compliance with standards, with global standards. What I'm talking about is there is a lot of protectionism here that prevents countries like Brazil, for example, to produce SAF or to produce green steel. And the same applies to Chile and to so many other goods in Africa. So without working very hard protectionism at the global scale, especially Europe, but also Japan, even China, it is extremely hard. So yes, financing is important, capacity building is important, and so on and so forth. But as I mentioned before, the domestic really is without the banks. From my perspective, this is the most important of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. The demand side and building global green markets and avoiding protectionism is certainly very important. I'd like to now move back to our second speaker, Michael Spoor with Ultrasur, just so that you might be able to complete your presentation. And if you have any thoughts on what you've been hearing and want to engage with those, then you're very welcome to. You may need to unmute your microphone.
Mike, we cannot hear you.
Maybe if Mike is having some technical difficulties, maybe we can give him some time and ask another speaker to come in.
Sure. So the next speaker, the third speaker that we had was Ivo Munde. So I'd welcome you, Ivo, to pitch in, give us some of your reflections, and you're more than welcome if you want to continue your presentation. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Fred and colleagues. So I finished the first part of my presentation with a business incubation platform that we've developed called the Restoration Factory. Here you see some numbers about the impact we've had. So we've deployed this mechanism where we essentially link promising ecopreneurs with mentors on a one-on-one basis, coupled with support in the form of encouragement grants in about 10 countries. We've supported more than 400 SMEs. There's another 200 that are in the process of being supported this year. And we're basically tracking support not just during the program, but up to 2 years afterwards as well. As we just don't want to know what whether and to what extent they're successful during the 6 or 12 months, but also in the year and 2 years after that, both from an environmental perspective, say a climate mitigation perspective, but also from a social perspective as well. I use my presentation to say that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but SMEs need to be supported along a continuum, along a value chain. One facility that my team is managing is called the Restoration Seed Capital Facility. It has about $28 million where we provide repayable grants to impact investors and project developers on a cost-sharing basis, meaning that $1 of support provided by us to a project developer or impact investor needs to be matched by $1 on their side. So there's no free lunch, but it basically reduces the pre-investment stage cost, both for fund development, but also pipeline and project development. In the case of fund development, we provide up to $750,000, and for pipeline and project development together, we provide $2.5 million, which means that the other 50% needs to come from the private sector partners. Through this, we've helped leverage more than $200 million over the past 4 years. You see the 8 project developers and impact investors on this slide. We're in the process of onboarding another 2 or 3 in the coming weeks, and this is sort of the crux of what I wanted to talk about is our pitch or ask towards government donors or private philanthropy is saying, provide funding so we can leverage that with private capital to stimulate private investment in restoration, by really being quite focused either on the pre-investment stage or in the form of business development, as I showed earlier, but with a direct focus on private capital leverage, again, in different areas of development. A last example that I'd like to show is the Agri-Free Fund, which I helped co-create together with Rabobank and the Dutch Development Bank. This is mostly providing partial credit guarantees to banks in order for them to lend to clients in developing countries with positive forest, agriculture, and livelihood impact. it has raised about $100 million to date, with a active loan portfolio of about 250 million. And next week they will announce the another investor coming on board with 170 million, pushing their AUM assets under management to about 270 million. And so this is the type of catalytic capital facilities that could be useful for SMEs who are in a much more advanced stage, but where lenders are unwilling to provide support unless, say, 20, 30, up to 50% of a loan would be covered in the form of a guarantee. That basically provides the security that lenders in developing countries need. And loans have been issued in Nicaragua, in Malawi, in Brazil, in China, and other countries. And so these are the kinds of facilities that my team has helped to catalyze, and which directly and indirectly help stimulate restoration in emerging markets. So I'd like to hand it back to you, Fred.
I think Fred is frozen. Give him a few minutes or a few seconds. I think his connection is frozen. Maybe we can call back on Mike. Michael.
Is my
Michael.
my microphone working again?
Yes, we can
All right.
hear you.
Sorry about that. I had to leave and re-enter. So thank you for your patience. Yeah, I just want to close with a couple of thoughts. Our thesis has been that the forest transition follows
If you could present the full screen.
Yeah, I am working on that. There you go. Our thesis is that forest transition follows economic and governance transition. So the question is, how do we extend that over all actors in a landscape, whether it's in fisheries in the Caribbean, or rural development in the Peruvian Amazon, or landscapes in Africa? How do we extend these transitions to cover all actors in a landscape? Because environmental outcomes depend on whether all actors have access to systems that are needed to deliver those outcomes. And here's the thing, large operators are typically expected to meet high environmental standards, and smaller operators are often given simplified requirements. And over time, our experience is this can create an unintended result. The environmental expectations become concentrated where capabilities already exist. And this can create a dangerous problem, because that will focus development in places where it's easiest to monitor in large operations. But the problem is that if nature teaches us anything, it's that resilience rarely emerges from single large solutions. Nature teaches us that it relies on redundancy, on diversity, and on distributed adaptation. So inclusion of SMEs is critically important, not just from a moral standpoint, but because it's the way nature works. And that's the way we have to make our development work. So even though larger operators are easier to regulate, monitor, and manage, we can't optimize exclusively for efficiency while sacrificing adaptive capacity. This is the key point of what we have seen. But inclusion of SMEs cannot entail lowering environmental ambitions. So this is the other side of that same coin. So that means it means making environmental performance accessible. The objective cannot be millions of isolated producers. It needs to be millions of producers connected to systems that allow them to perform environmentally in ways that historically only large, well-funded institutions can afford. Shared infrastructure, shared technical assistance, shared traceability, shared verification, financing, learning. Climate mitigation isn't about only funding projects. It's about funding environmental capacity. So in our ambitious Mayankon Life Park, we have 26,000 hectares, close to 1,000 participating families. And the objective is not to ask every family to independently build the environmental systems expected of a multinational company. Instead, we're creating tiered environmental capability, shared MRV, shared learning, and shared traceability. Our expectations remain differentiated, but our environmental ambitions remain shared. We believe the future may belong to systems that combine the environmental capabilities of scale with the adaptability and resilience of distributed participation. So in closing, our observation is that our challenge is not a shortage of ideas. It is in learning how to translate capital into durable changes in human behavior and the creation of permanent land use system. Climate finance can't be evaluated only on how much money is deployed, but actually on whether it's changing trajectories. Does it make restoration more attractive than degradation? Does it make permanence more attractive than extraction? Does it make production more attractive than expansion? Does it make compliance easier than informality? Inclusion is important, and both nature and morality agree on this. It must mean extending environmental capability. The objective is not to choose a winner between big models and small models. The objective is to create landscapes where the most rational decisions for people also become the most sustainable decisions for nature. That may be one of the most durable forms of climate mitigation we can build. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. That's very informative. It certainly touches on one of the key issues that I wanted to discuss in this webinar, which is the question of collective action and how to generate action by many and not simply action by a few. The next speaker that I'd like to turn to is Stefania Magiste. Just to, if you'd like to continue your presentation or give us some of your feedback, also keeping in mind some of this collective as a major problem that we're trying to overcome.
Yes, thank you very much, and very interesting to hear to my colleagues. I would just present one slide, so then we can chat maybe a little bit about what my colleagues have also presented and discussed. Can you see the whole presentation? No. Yes. So I think I can connect this slide a little bit with what Professor Emilio said. He mentioned the need of blended finance and mobilizing private investments, and I think this is this line of integrating SMEs into global and sustainable value chains through international investment. I think this could be one way of mobilizing private investment. So I mentioned here in my left hand side column, the target the right investment. So what we are thinking is that in order, governments, they can influence and they can implement actions and policies to attract foreign direct investment, right? So what we believe is that there is a right type of investments that can be attracted. And it would be ideal to integrate some considerations such as the NDC, the nationally determined contributions. They could be integrated or embedded, right? It's the fancy word to talk about this. Into investment promotion and climate priorities. And what we saw, there is a research that we published recently in UNCTAD that this was the previous cycle of NDCs, now there's a new cycle there, but from the 168 active NDCs, 90% mention investment, so it's great, but only 25% of those NDCs, they refer to foreign direct investment, and just one NDC sets concrete targets on attracting those investments. So I think this could be a starting point on how can we mobilize those resources. There's also something that Ivo mentioned many times during his presentation, and I think it connects very well with our approach here, is that not all SMEs are the same, right? Not all SMEs have the same challenges, opportunities, or they are integrated in the same way in a value chain. So what could be interesting is to include SMEs in the discussions of those investment policies and include their perspective when attracting FDI and also when setting incentives. For example, investment promotion agencies usually they design development programs, they define incentives, they define criteria or KPIs for attracting investment. Why not include SMEs' perspective in this kind of policies, right? And tailor this kind of support to SME realities. So overall, the objective is not only to attract investment that contributes to low carbon transformation, but also to make sure that the benefits of international investment and of those linkages, right? They are accessible to SMEs, and they can be used not only to allow those SMEs to comply and to fulfill expectations and to access mitigation funds, but also to become more competitive in the world. So it's basically a win-win agenda that we are trying to promote. And yeah, I think it connects with some topics that my colleagues mentioned. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefania. We'll now move to addressing some of those questions with another 5-minute presentation by Mr. Daniel Galvan. Daniel, please.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the intervention from other panelists. Maybe to, yes, I think as it was mentioned by other panelists, as and also is highlighted in the climate finance guide, to encourage the SMEs to align their mitigation activities to the NDCs. The guide complements the work that we are doing with Article 6 crediting mechanism, because it clearly says that or identify the needs for the SMEs to establish monitoring, reporting, and verification systems. So that's what we are trying to develop, methodologies with guidance from the parties, of course, that are going to be available to, of course, private and public sector, and that will help to hopefully to standardize MRV system for the project developers to demonstrate the positive impacts in emission reduction, but also the positive impacts in sustainable development. So yeah, the guide complements the work that we are doing in Secretariat. I would like to highlight this. And yes, it's true that in the NDCs, most of the information is related to the action from parties, from countries. That's why I was mentioning at the beginning, when we think about Paris Agreement, we usually think only on parties and their commitments on mitigation adaptation. But in the last round of NDCs, the 3.0, based on the synthesis report we published before COP, we identified that more than 65% of the NDCs mention about carbon markets. So somehow it gives the signal that there will be participation from private sector, maybe indirectly, but I think it's there. So yes, invite the audience to implement the guide, and yeah, to thanks Green Initiative and the other panelists for being here. Thank you, Fred. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. We'll now move back to Director Mark Williams from the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism. Mark, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. The essence of the blue economy is a model in which climate mitigation, economic development, and ecosystems health reinforce one another, requiring a fundamental shift in how we design and deliver climate finance. So what we must do? First, we must integrate fisheries in national climate finance frameworks. Fisheries must be explicitly recognized in NDCs, climate investment plans, and green taxonomy systems. This is not merely a bureaucratic exercise. It is a signal of the priorities that unlocks access to international climate finance and guides domestic investment. Second, we must build robust data and monitoring systems. Standardized methodologies for measuring emissions, reductions in fisheries and aquaculture are essential. Investments in digital catch reporting, vessel tracking, and ecosystems monitoring must become a core component of fisheries governance. Data is not just a technical requirement, it is a foundation for credible transparency and investment readiness. Third, we must build pipelines of bankable projects. This means moving beyond concepts and pilots initiative towards structured investment-ready proposals. Blended finance models that combine public grants, concessional financing, and private capital can help bridge the viability gap and make fisheries projects more attractive to investors. Fourth, we must actively de-risk investments. Financial investments such as guarantees in insurance products and first loss capital can play a transformative role in crowding private sector participation. Multilateral development banks and climate funds have critical responsibility to lead this space. Fifth, we must empower small-scale actors. Inclusive finance mechanisms such as microfinance, cooperative lending models, and results-based financing must be designed to reach those most often excluded, such as small-scale fishers, women, and youth. A just transition requires that no one be left behind. Six, we must scale blue carbon finance, carbon markets, and results-based payments for ecosystem services can unlock new revenue streams for coastal communities and directly contribute to global mitigation targets. By valuing the carbon sequestration potential of coastal ecosystems, we create incentives for their protection and restoration. Seven, we must strengthen regional collaboration in regions such as the Caribbean, where marine ecosystems and fish stocks are shared. Coordinated approach are essential. Regional institutions can play a pivotal role by aggregating projects, harmonizing policies, and reducing transaction costs, thereby making investments more efficient and impactful. Colleagues, this is our call to action. We are not starting from zero. Around the world, promising initiatives are already emerging. Innovative financing platforms are being tested. Pilot projects are demonstrating the viability of low-carbon fisheries. The concept of the blue economy is gaining traction in the global climate discourse. But incremental progress will not be enough. We need systemic change. We must therefore move from fragmented pilot projects to scale investment programs, from risk avoidance to proactive risk management and opportunity creation. From viewing fisheries solely as a vulnerable sector to recognizing them as strategic assets for global climate mitigation. Let me close on this. The ocean has always sustained us, feeding our people, powering our economies, and connecting our cultures. Now it is calling on us to act with urgency, ambition, and purpose. Climate mitigation finance in fisheries is not just about reducing emissions. It is about securing livelihoods, protecting ecosystems, redefining development pathways for coastal nations. It is about building a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient future. If we get it right, we will not only safeguard our fisheries, but unlock one of the most powerful engines of sustainable growth in the 21st century. So the question before us is not whether we can afford to invest in climate mitigation for fisheries. The question is, can we afford not to? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was very inspiring. I'd like to move now to Professor Lebre Larovera again for some more insightful comments. Professor, please.
Thank you very much. Just want to reinforce some points previously made by Marcos and Stephanie. I think it's very important that the role of development bank is just not being a counter that waits for good projects coming in, but actually that goes on the other side of the counter and helping the capacity building and actually in making viable projects to be designed and presented. I think this is very badly needed in the global south. And also on Stephanie's point, in terms of procurement practice to insert SMEs in the global supply chains, I think that the national platforms, you have now this investment opportunities platforms that countries are establishing with a portfolio of projects for mitigation and adaptation. And that's a good opportunity where countries could actually provide some guidance and some priority to subcontracting SMEs as part of the architecture of the projects. I think this will be an entrance door for SMEs in the system in terms that there are many opportunities, and we know that SMEs is the place where jobs are created actually in most of the economies. So I think this is crucial in order to enhance the social and economic benefits of this climate mitigation projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. We'll now conclude with some final statements by Marcos Weiner from the IFC. And with that, we will draw the meeting to a conclusion.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I think the biggest challenge here is the challenge of scale, right? We are facing a fundamental global crisis, and one-off interventions are not enough. I mean, we're all doing our best, but it really means taking a systemic approach. In that sense, I was very impressed by Michael's model that he presented. That's, you know, for me, seems to take this type of systems thinking to the next level, right? And really look at it from that perspective, right? So I think, you know, something I would like to learn more about. The other point I want to make is that it became, you know, clear to me, and it reflects our observations, that there's no one size fits all. You also need to be mindful of sectoral differences and develop solutions that are sector specific. We heard from Mark Williams in the case of the fisheries sector, you know, their particular challenges, which are different than, you know, the forestry sector or the manufacturing sector. So I think we all have to put also our thinking hats on and understand what solutions are more appropriate for these, you know, different sectoral challenges, right? I mean, from our side, I think what Professor Emilio said, that, you know, as development financial institutions, we have to go above and beyond, not waiting for, you know, the ideal projects to you know, to come to us, but rather what we call it in IFC, take an upstream approach. And we're doing exactly that. So we are engaging very proactively with opportunities that are not investment ready today, but they may be 3 or 5 years even down the line, right? And help build that capacity so when they get to a maturity level where we can finally invest directly or indirectly. As I said, we are playing our part to make that happen. And in closing, I would say, this is a collective effort again for all these challenges and for the projects to move up the maturity level, and the companies that are part of those, we need to partner, right? So I would say partner with those that have the technical capacity, those that have the capital, those that have the scientific knowledge, those that have the presence and the boots on the ground, the contacts, to walk together towards this common goal. So again, I want to thank the organizers, the Green Initiative, and all the panelists for the insightful conversation, and I will be very happy to continue this in any way, shape, or form. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcos. And with that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers once again. Thank you very much for your participation and for your insights. And I'd also like to thank our participants. We appreciate your time, and we're grateful that you spent this past hour and 45 minutes with us. And with that, I'd like to bring this meeting to a close and wish you all a good day. Thank you very much.